Time to build the tacking. Hello, I'm Ramon and welcome back to All Steel RC. Here we have the Primer Artifact Tacking 500, I believe it is. Alright, so we're going to build it. Now, somebody in the comments mentioned that the motor seems a little undersized. I agree 100% that the motor does seem undersized for this RC, but we're going to try a couple different things. It is a 1/10 scale crawler according to their website. Now, it does use really wide axles. These are axial riff axles, I believe. They are aluminum, so they're not that heavy. The tires are not really heavy. They're large, but they're not really heavy. I've had heavier tires, so it might not be too bad on weight when it's done, I'm thinking. The wheels are printed wheels too. They're not really heavy. So now the recommended motor for this is the Fusion Pro, and that's possibly one of the reasons is you don't need an ESC for this. And there's probably nowhere to put an ESC in the RC once it's completed, since it has a full interior with opening doors, and where are you going to hide the ESC? So the motor recommended is the Fusion Pro, which looks like it might be a little undersized for this, but I do see people running crawlers that are really weighed down with lots of brass and using the Fusion Pro, and it seems to do okay. So we're going to see how this does in here. I do have the brand new Fusion 8 as well, which if I can get this to fit, I will go with the Fusion 8, but we won't know until I build it. Now for the servos, I am using the 9 iMod 35 kg servo. I also have 55 kgs as well. When I look at the recommended servo for this, I think it's a 1100 ounce servo, and I think these 35 kg servos equal out to about the same, so I might just go with the 35 instead of the 55. And when I looked at the kit, being that the wheels are 3D printed, the axles are aluminum, the only weight added are the brass, the really large brass hexes. To control this crawler when it's done, I'm going to be using my Fly Sky Noble with a FGR4 receiver. I think I have to update this and program it since I updated the software on this, so I'm going to have to reprogram this, but that's pretty much it, I guess, for the electronics. Oh, I almost forgot. I do have a winch for this. I just bought a winch. I did not do anything crazy. So the Endura is a 35 kg 360 winch servo. Came with your winch hook, it looks like. So that's what we'll be using. I don't think I'll be in any real situations that I'll need a winch. So I couldn't justify spending all the money on the expensive reef winch, since where I live at is pretty much flat. Let's figure out what parts we need for the first steps, and let's start building. I wish they would have given us paper instructions. This is just a picture. Installing the SSD transmission, the drive shafts, and one of these two motors on the chassis, on the main part of the chassis, it looks like. Now, I did say in the unboxing that this comes very well wrapped. Here's the parts we're looking for. Perfect. At least they kept them together. Those are the exact 3 parts I need. Instructions are not very wordy, so there's not a lot on the instructions. It kind of shows you pictures and arrows. I'm going to include a link to the instructions in the description, but they're not very wordy. But right now I can tell just by trying that your metal motor mount plate is actually replaced by this piece here, because it will not sit flush with it on. So that definitely will have to come off, and this is going to replace it. So your motor is going to be mounted up to this. This is your new motor mount plate right here, and it already has a recess area for your motor, which I'm sure it's going to be your 540 motor, which the Fusion 8 might fit, but we're going to have to see if it fits in the transmission tunnel, because this has a tunnel that's going to go over all this. So we're going to have to see how that fits, but that will actually fit in that recessed area, and you can actually get screws into it. So maybe they took that into consideration. Let's see how big the transmission tunnel is, and we'll see if this will fit in. It's like you have to dry fit everything, especially since you're trying to do stuff that wasn't recommended. You have to sit here and try to dry fit and find all your parts before, or else you'll run into hiccups later. So you have to sit here and try to figure it all out. Alright, so that's going to go like that at some point. Anyways, let's see these. So here's the Fusion Pro. Here's the Fusion 8. Here they go side by side. And can-wise, you can see the difference. The Fusion 8 is substantially bigger. And it is substantially taller. Shaft size are different. I'm guessing this might be a 3.5 and this one might be a 5 mil. I'm thinking. I have to find some other parts to see if the 8 will fit. Now as far as the 8, I actually had set aside for, I was going to actually stick this in another crawler I have. So I'm hoping not to use this since I'm adding a ton of brass to my other crawler. I wanted a big strong engine for that. A big strong motor, actually, not an engine. So I'm hoping not to have to use this. If it fits, I might have to. And I'll just be ordering another one, which would suck. But it is what it is. So I went ahead and started loosely trying to put some stuff together to figure out if the Fusion 8 would fit this. And it is a big no. You're not going to get a Fusion 8 in here because of this cover that will go. Motor goes right here. This is the Fusion Pro 540 size can. That goes there. And this housing here goes like that. And because of that housing, all you can fit in there is a 540 can. I don't know if you can see that, but you will not be able to get the Fusion 8 in there. So that's a no on the Fusion 8. You need the Fusion Pro. Now, I don't know if you can build it without this, then you can do whatever you want. Now, another thing is, if you're using the SSD transmission, you might also be limited on what size pinion you can use in this, because there isn't a whole lot of room in here pinion-wise. And I was looking around this kit, and I don't see a pinion. So, hey, looks like the transmission brought the pinion. So maybe that's why they don't mention it. Look at that. The SSD transmission does come with your pinion. So, ooh, that saved me some headaches. Here's your motor mounting plate off the transmission. It does have a bearing there. It does have a bearing which you're going to have to transfer over to your primer artifact motor mount plate. So they did put the hole there for the bearing. So just pop it off. It's a non-shielded bearing. I must tell you though, the fitment is freaking amazing. So far, I've been lining up parts and everything. The fitment is perfect. It's hard to believe how good the fitment is. The transmission holes, everything line up. Wow. All right. So I was cleaning off the motor shaft since the transmission has grease inside. I don't know if I got any grease on the motor shaft. And I don't want the pinion to pop off. So making sure that's clean. This is all oiled up. I'm going to have to clean this. I'm trying to determine how far this in here to where it sits. There's no, it's pretty far in. Let me try that again. The mounting plate for the motor is pretty thick. The gear for the transmission sits towards the back of the wall of the transmission. So basically, I put the pinion on as far out as possible, and I put it in there carefully without touching any of the sides. And once it hit the back wall, I pushed on it so it slides in, and it shows me that this is about how far the shaft you can have that pinion. Now I'm gonna back it down a little bit more because I don't want it to rub against anything, but I want it to get good coverage on the gear inside the transmission. That's about 9.5 millimeters of space. So I'm gonna slide it back a little bit, but that's a lot further out than what I thought it would be. And also, this transmission has grease inside of it. This pinion has grease on it, so I'm going to clean it up real good and then put it on with Loctite. Look how good of a fitment this is. And you can even see daylight through the screw holes from the transmission. That's really good fitment. That is so good. Here is my mini-sized bottle of thread locker. If you guys are going to be doing lots of builds, I'm telling you, at the cost of thread locker and those little tubes, you might as well just get the big one. It's cheaper and it lasts you forever. Oh, this thing sucks. Now, the only thing I don't like about this is setting your mesh for your pinion. It's like flying blind. So I'm going to figure out what screws I need to mount this motor, and I'm going to set the mesh. And then I'm going to program the receiver, since I want to make sure this thing is running and sounds okay before I put it all together. This thing, I don't know how well or how easy it will be to access this motor to adjust it after it's all put together. So I want to make sure it's right before I make a critical mistake here. So let me make sure that's right, and then I can build this thing. This is all the tedious stuff. This is like, once you figure out your electronics, get them right, then everything else should bolt right on. So it shouldn't be bad. But it's just doing this, which is the most important part. I mean, did the best I could. I actually was able to pull the gearing out of the transmission and seat it on there, and I think I got the mesh to where it's hopefully good enough. I don't want to make it too loose because the teeth are not, I don't know what pitch it is, but they're not very forgiving. So that should be fine, I hope. I just didn't want to put this together and realize it was either too loose or too tight and have to disassemble the whole thing. I haven't gotten far enough into this project to where I can tell whether it's going to be easy access to the motor, but from the looks of it, I don't think it is. It looks like everything's built inside of a tunnel. So I'm making sure everything's right before I proceed. Pretty much look like that when it's done, but I'm going to power it up first. Everything is mounted as far as the motor transmission. I'm just using a 2S Arlo battery that I had here laying around. Just going to use this for testing. I plan on running this on 3S since the Quick Run Pro can handle up to 3S, so it will be getting 3S. There you can see the center diff there working. Now I mounted the bolts or the screws from the outside, and it is threaded into this motor mounting plate. The screws actually should be a little longer. Now another thing on here is on the top for the drive shafts, it has two measurements. One of the measurements is 30 millimeters, the other one is even less, 26. I'll put up a picture of the directions on the screen. It just has these measurements, and I'm not sure what those measurements were, but if they're telling you to trim this to 30 millimeters, that's not correct, because that wouldn't be very much. That would be a very short drive shaft. So I'm not going to trim these at the moment. I want to fit the axles onto the chassis, and once I'm able to get the axles on the chassis, then I'll figure out where these actually need to be cut. Now, when cutting these, you want to be careful because one side has teeth, and that is not the side you want to cut. So one side has a spline pretty much. So you want to cut the opposite side that does not have a spline. It looks like there's two little grub screws on this end, which you would pop off. You can see the spline on there. That is not the side you want to cut. Directions don't say much, just a whole lot of pointing and parts. Not too much verbiage. So since I'm not sure if I have to cut these yet, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the spline side on the transmission, so that way I could slide these in and out. I think that's going to make my life a lot easier. Now your bags do have listed out as far as your hardware. I get to put the first piece on, and in the directions it refers to using flat screws to mount this piece on, and the screws provided are button head, so there's a mistake in directions right in the beginning. And you want to watch the fitment because it's very slight, but you can see that there is a difference. So watch your fitment carefully there. You'll see what I mean. So this is taking two button head screws instead of two flat head screws. The flat head screws are tapered, and they would probably break your part if you try to tighten them up in there. The button head screws have a flat bottom. Wow, almost done. Now the motor and transmission, the fitment is just crazy. Once it just falls in place, the fitment's perfect. Now another thing I want to point out is in the pictures of the motor, the rotation of the motor showed the wires sticking up, and that's what I'm doing. So these parts, they just fit so well, it's crazy. Fitment's great, directions are questionable. So these next parts, I think this is possibly 4, but These next parts will encapsulate your motor. And this is what my concern was. If you didn't get the mesh right, how easy is it going to be to get to your motor to adjust that mesh? And it doesn't seem like it will be very easy. So this part will go over top here, and it has a little slot here on the side right there for your power switch and your power wire for your receiver. So you want to make sure they go out through there, and out the top your battery line will come out. So we have to make sure we do that. And this is the cover that goes underneath your motor, and this is why we couldn't get 8th scale that Fusion 8 in there, and it was because this isn't big enough to fit a Fusion 8. This thing was designed around a 540 can motor. So I'm gonna go ahead and screw this together, and I'll catch you on the next step. So we have the parts around the motor's now inside there. So you have to take apart half this thing probably to get to anything with. Let me try this again. My SD card got full. The receiver I was trying to put in this was too big, so I had to switch it out for a smaller receiver, which involved reprogramming a different receiver. It's always something when you're building. But I have the motors completely enclosed now, and this was my big concern because you don't get that mesh right, it's hard to get to afterwards. Now in the instructions it shows the battery wire on this side. There's a lump right here on the side of this tunnel, pretty much. It's a tunnel for your drive shaft and your transmission. So this side is actually cleaner, it has nothing there. So I'm gonna put it here, and hopefully I don't regret it. I have to install the rear tire mount now. I believe it takes these screws and 3/14s. These two screws here seem like they're too long. So I'm gonna see if I have shorter ones. Much better. That's a M314, and it needs to be like a M312. Okay, so next is cage looking thing. So that's gonna go like that. I had the centerpiece reversed right here, which you want to make sure it goes this way since you have to be able to get your battery in and out. So make sure you don't have that reversed. You need that big opening there for your battery. Put the clutch on a real light setting. You want to be careful since you'll strip out your... This would be pretty easy to strip, I would think. This is still part of the chassis. We're not anywhere near being built. Here's a 1/10 scale crawler. This is a 1/10 scale chassis. I don't know how this is 1/10 scale, but if it is, they stretch the heck out of it. Okay, so far this kit's full of surprises. In the directions, well, in the list of what's needed to complete, it didn't mention that you needed a fan. Well, I guess you could build it without the fan, but there is a spot for a fan in the directions. But in your list of needed to complete, it didn't mention a fan that I noticed, or else I would have just got a fan. So I had to stop, dig through my stuff, go find the fan. So in this nice little perfectly made, I guess it's a fan shroud, I was able to find the fan. I put it in here. It should clear everything. But I was wondering though, with how enclosed this motor is, how is that heat gonna get out? So if you get this kit, buy a fan. That actually fits in there perfectly. So you can see the fan in there. It does work. I already tried it, but I wish I would have known ahead of time because I would have routed it out through here. Now I'm gonna have to, I'll zip tie it to the motor wire, it'll be fine, but just would have been a little cleaner. There you go, fans installed. Got a nice little grill over, whoops, losing the battery. Has a nice little grill over top. And this cover I put on here is just like a dummy cover. I don't think it does anything or goes to anything. Next pieces are these, I think they're like your shock towers, pretty much, where your shocks are gonna actually mount up to. So we're on day 2. Got to the point in the directions where it said to install your headlamps. Well, the headlamps come in, they're really nicely made. They're 3-piece print, which, let me see if this is the right one. Nope, that's the wrong one. They're a 3-piece print, and here's the housing. Here's the bezel, and here's what would be the reflective portion of the headlamp, the back of the headlamp. It doesn't come painted. I went ahead and painted it because I wanted it to reflect light better, pretty much. And it comes with, you have a choice of either yellow or clear lenses. I think these bulbs that I found, I don't know if it was the circuit bulb doing it or if the warmth of the bulb, it's a yellow bulb already, so I might go white at the bottom and yellow on top for the top lens. But I have to wire these up. So basically I took the holes inside of this rear housing that holds the actual bulbs, and I had to ream it a little bit with a drill bit so that I can pass through my LEDs because the holes were not large enough to pass 2 wires through. So now that I have the LED bulbs installed, I am going to use a little bit of hot glue to keep them from sliding out, from moving around. That should definitely do it. So I got my trusty Christmas present Ryobi here. This thing is great. A Ryobi glue gun, which works great. So I'm going to go ahead and get these glued so the bulbs can't move around and figure out how to wire them up. And I'm going to have to put some kind of a sleeve on these wires because I don't want to see all these wires. So let's get to that. You know what's funny? Every time you start a build, you're like, that'd be like 2-hour build. This is day 2. So I mounted the headlamps. I actually wired them, but I don't have a LED light module or anything, and these lights I put in here have no resistors, so I can't plug them in. But there's the headlamps installed. Now we're going to be working on the upper and lower links. I have to figure out which ones are which. They don't want to open. These look like the lower part of a chicken wing. Not the drum section, but the other section. Now, these are not labeled, so I'm hoping they're identical. They look the same. So you want to make sure you install your upper links first, or you probably will not be able to get to them afterwards. So here's the rear upper links, and here's the front upper links. And now be careful because your front upper links and your rear upper links are different. The ones with the larger bend go in the front. All links are mounted now. It's like a little, like it's gonna walk. So after the lights, the next step was actually to get the front bumper on and get your winch installed. Now the winch I bought was a standard servo style winch, and basically when you put it in here, it lined the spool lines up correctly, but it sits up way too tall. Looks hideous. So I'm gonna pass on the winch. I did try using a normal style winch, not a servo style, and a Warn winch. And when I put it in there, you couldn't get it right. The section where your rope should come out for the winch is right here in the center, and with the regular style winch, it would come out through the top. It wouldn't look right. So I am going to have to buy either a low profile winch like this or the reef one. So I'll just order the reef one. It'll make my life easier. It should line up perfectly. I think that's what this thing was designed around anyway. So I'll get the reef one. So it requires you to have 3 to 6 millimeter spacers for your shocks. So when you go to install your shock, now you have the issue of your shock with the way this angles and your shock sits. It wouldn't, the way the shock is, it wouldn't seat right. You need a spacer in between the mounting point and the shock. They're not included. So basically what I did was I took screws. Well, there are 2 things I had to do for the shocks. When you put the screw in the shock, let me find the other shock. Also, I have to put oil in these. But, so 3 things I have to do. When you put your screw in the shock, it's like throwing a hot dog down a hallway. So I took the screws and I put heat shrink on them where the shock is going to sit. So right here I just put 2 layers of heat shrink on, so now it just gives it a way nicer fit. It doesn't flop around as much. Hopefully that doesn't impede any movement. But I did that, and then where's the other one? And then to account for the spacer that was not provided, I put 2 little nuts on the end there, which are not pinching the shock because the heat shrink stops it. So I put that there for now. I could always replace it with something else later. Also on the front bumper, I installed the shackles, and here is the plate that goes in front of the winch. That's installed there. So I'm gonna mount this. So far the fitment of everything has been great. There's the front bumper mounted so far. Headlamps. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. Definitely needs a winch in there, so I'm gonna have to get that. Next, I'm going to be installing the servo and the shocks onto the front and rear axles. I'm going to do that before I'm going to install the shocks on the axle before I mount it to the body. Also, hopefully, now I'm hoping that I don't have to cut these drive shafts. If I do, hopefully I won't have to take stuff back apart to get to it. But if I do, it is what it is. But let me go ahead and install the servo and the shocks on here, and then we'll mount it up to this chassis and see where we're at with the drive shafts. A lot of this stuff would be way easier if the instructions were clearer. So far, it looks like something out of Star Wars. All right, we have the servos installed on the axles and the shocks. So we're gonna mount these now, and that way I'll be able to tell how I'm supposed to cut these axles, the proper length. Like I said on the top of the instructions, it just has it just shows cut. It just says cut to length 26/30 millimeters. I don't know what that means. There's a lack of information there. If I was to cut this down to 30 millimeters, I'd have a stub. So do they mean you need to take off 30 millimeters? That's probably what I'm guessing, but it is not written out properly. All right, let's get these axles on. And for that, I think I'm gonna flip it over. Okay, get the upper links on first. Can't believe I just put that on upside down. Okay, once again, now I was able to measure, and it looks like you have to take, so it is, according to my measurements, about 30 and 26. As it says up top, it just doesn't explain, you know, it just tells you random numbers out there, doesn't tell you what to do with it. All right, so like I said, these drive shafts have teeth on one side, or are keyed on one side. Spline is the name. So on one side it has a spline, and the other side it has a universal with two little Allen screws. I'm assuming you have to remove the Allen screws, get this end off, and cut it from this side. You can't cut the spline side off because that's the side that goes into the one that's connected to your transmission. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to get these off without stripping the Allen screws, and I'm gonna get these cut down to 26 and 30. Well, I'm gonna cut 26 millimeters off one, 30 off the other, and hopefully that's right. Okay, I cut the drive shafts down to size. I used a regular cutoff wheel on the Dremel. Now, something weird happened after I cut it. I guess these are pressure fitted on because it was hard coming off. I cut them. After that, I couldn't get it back on. I don't know if from the heat from cutting it, if the metal expanded or what, but also to get the Allen screws off of this, to get this to slide off, I did apply heat to that. So I don't know if possibly the universal joint expanded and contracted, or if the shaft itself expanded when I cut it with the cutoff wheel. Things like this is what kills you when you're building stuff. Just takes forever. Drive shafts are on. Let's go with this. If you've never built a RC before, I do not recommend this kit as a first kit. Go get yourself a Tamiya or something like that, because this is challenging. That's looking good. Here are both axles installed. I still won't know my clearance for my tires until I actually put some more parts on here. I guess tomorrow I'll run the wiring for the servos. This one should reach, and this one will possibly need an extension. So here it is. That's how far I got today. Tomorrow's another day. Now front and rear axles are installed. I said that already, I think. This is the following day. So front and rear axles installed, servos are installed, they're wired up, and we are going to turn it on. Now this is the main tunnel, the main part of the chassis. Everything else is pretty much body and tires. So all the mechanicals are in. I need to revisit the lights because I had a light situation. But the four-wheel steer and everything is now working. Here's front steer. Hopefully you can see that. Here's front steer. Here's rear steer. Here's crab walk. And here's four-wheel steer. Hopefully that comes through well on camera. But that's the steering for this thing. And that's only on 2S right now. The Fusion Pro can take up to 3S, so I'll be squeezing in a 3S battery in this thing. So it should be a little faster. I don't see a lot of speed coming out of this thing, to be honest with you. But it's probably a good thing. I don't know how durable this is. It's definitely not a basher. I wouldn't recommend it for bashing. Maybe a couple spills on the rocks. Crawling, it might be okay, but as a basher, I think you'll tear this thing up. And so far, my struggles have been, it didn't come with the screws for the shocks up top. These are a little short, and the shocks didn't come with a sleeve or anything. So I had to make one out of heat shrink on the screws and use nuts as spacers, because it requires a 3 to 6 millimeter spacer right here, and it requires spacers at the bottom too, which I just used a single nut on the bottom. So I used 2 nuts up top, single nut at the bottom as a spacer. I think it gave it the right distance it needed. This material, it looks great, but it absorbs any dirt or whatever in your hands. It just absorbs it. It's like a magnet for dirt. So if you want to keep it this color, I suggest you probably using a flat clear or something that you can wipe up, because I've washed my hands 20 million times working on this thing. You would think I was performing surgery, and I still see dirt marks on it. Any oil, whatever, will show up immediately on this. It's crazy. Okay, time to continue building the body portion, I guess. Alright, so now we're building the cab section of the truck, and I am trying to figure out where to start, because there's a whole bunch of little parts. But these, all the window pieces go into nice channels. And I'll tell you, the fitment of this thing is great. It's just the directions are lacking. There are these silver dowels that go through these hooks. I'm just thinking I'm probably going to take this all apart at some point and paint it. But that is not going to be today. Now, this is interesting. And this is where things are not. This piece here that goes on this front piece where this hook is at, I don't know what to call it. It's all part of the frame. But this piece, you don't screw it in from the, you don't just put it on top like this. Let's get closer. This piece here that goes on the front nose, you would think that it would just screw on here, but it doesn't. It is actually designed like your hook, your lift hook goes here. This is like a transport hook. I guess if this thing was being choppered in somewhere, you would hook onto here. This piece goes through the top and then folds down underneath. If you don't do it that way, your pin is going to come out. The pin that holds the hook in place will come out. So you have to make sure you do that. My camera is about to die, so I'm going to have to switch the battery. See that? Now all these glasses have a film on them, so you're going to have to remove the film. Plan on taking part of this thing apart and painting parts. So I don't know, I'm debating whether to leave the film on or not, since I know I'm going to be taking this thing apart. There are some things I'm going to want to paint. Just some added touches. Maybe I'll remove it. Let's switch the battery. We're going to repeat the other side, same thing. Put the pin in, come in through the top, and whoops, there we go. I need to break down and get some better tools. Well, I had another one, I guess this is a 1.5. I had another one like this, but I broke it trying to break something free. So in this crappy one for now. Alright, so that was that. Everything just fits together perfectly. Alright, so I went to put these together. These are the pieces that go together, but if you notice, the threaded pieces are not in here. In the directions it says that the M3x10 button head screws go in here, and well, socket head screws go in here, and it fits together perfectly, but the threaded pieces are not in there. So I'm going to continue to build without them, but I will be contacting the manufacturer. Let's see how this works. Holy crap, some reflective ass glass. Be careful, there's only plastic film on one side, even though it looks like it might be on both. But if you remove it on both sides, you're going to be removing the tint. The side that has the plastic film actually feels kind of waxy. So that's how you can tell. I must have spun them around. Now it's beginning to look like something. I'll put that piece in later. This is going to stay together. I guess the cage or frame on of the cab. Sorry I did it off camera. I was struggling trying to hold it together and get it mounted. In order to get this on, this is held in with your shock tower portions. So you have to undo these two shock towers and undo the shocks in order to get it off. I just took off the top two screws, left the bottom screw loose after I removed the shock, and just tilted it out the way because it has a key piece that goes into there. So you're gonna have to undo both of these, move them forward, be able to sit the cab, balance it, try to hold it together because it still has no rigidity, since it doesn't really have any screws holding on the back or whatever. It's I don't know. I would hope we would get to the section that they tell you to put on the roof plate, the roof frame, because once you put on the roof, you actually have all these screw points that would make this nice and rigid. But haven't gotten to that yet. The next part of the directions are to build the doors and the seats. And I'm gonna pass on that for now because there's these plates for the bottom that will make this nice and rigid. So I'm gonna put these plates on first and then I'll worry about the seats and the doors or whatever. I just wanna make this structurally sound first so that way I can move it around and not have to worry about these glasses coming undone or the rear windows coming off and stuff like that. I want it to just stay together pretty much. So let's get these bottom pieces on. And one surprise I actually have is I haven't seen it yet, but it looks like the roof panels, there's a bag with magnets, and I'm hoping they're for the roof, because the way this battery sits, if they made it so that way you can access it to the roof, that'll be great. That'll be a smart thing they did. They did a lot of smart stuff. See, I just touch it and it wants to come apart, so that's why I need to get this on. I'm scared to flip this. I'm not even going to put all the screws in it at the moment, just in case I have to undo it for some reason. But I just want to make this a little more rigid. I guess I can get that battery out of there. I have no clue why they wouldn't be telling you to put the roof frame on. I might go ahead and do that. Just sounds more logical to me. I'm going to look over the directions, see if there's going to be anything in the way if I put that roof in. And if not, I'm just going to put it in. The seats have to go in. The dash has to go in. And it looks like most of the install of everything is done through the hole in the roof, so that's why. But I guess I'll wait till I get that far. Then I'm gonna go ahead and build the doors and the seats, and I guess that's next. But as you can see, as of now, it is a pretty big RC car. Like I said, for reference, here's a 1/10 scale crawler, and this thing is pretty damn big. Now another thing I wanted to point out, in the directions it tells you to go ahead and stick your switch on top of the transmission tunnel or a transmission cover. And here's your dash. Your dash has a hole for the start button for your for your motor or ESC, whatever. It has a hole right there. Now I already double-sided taped the switch to the transmission tunnel. More than likely it's not going to align with this, so I'm going to have to undo it and redo it. Yep, just a little bit off, but I just undid it real quick. Let's go build some doors and build the seats. I actually decided to build the wheels instead. I wanted to make sure, I wanted to check the clearance in the back because of the four-wheel steering, so I decided to do those. And let me just show you how those go together. These wheels are 4-piece wheels, and you have a outer lip, which is the narrower one. You have an inner barrel, and you have the inside lip. So outer is the narrower one, the inner barrel and the inside lip. So this is going to be the one on the back, right? And now you have your centerpiece, which gets the brass on the back. It's held in by 6 screws. Now this is going to go in through the back of the deeper barrel, because this piece is what's threaded. So you want to make sure you put that in the back. And that's how your wheel goes. And here's a finished wheel. There are decals that go on this. I haven't applied them yet. I'm going to do all that later. I just want to get this thing built at this point. But see, here's the narrower, the barrel, the inner lip, and here is the piece that the brass goes on, and this is your threaded piece. So that's going to go in the back, and everything just gets sandwiched together. Got it? Now you do want to watch your treads, so you want to do two opposite from the other, and for the rear it doesn't matter. Now if you end up having to change a tire, it might be backwards, but you only have one spare, so it's either going to be a right or left tire. So you want to make sure you have two facing forward on the right and two facing forward on the left. Usually I like to stand them up so I can see the direction that they're going. And it sucks when you sit there and you build a wheel and realize you did it backwards. So I always stand them up. And that's kind of how I put them together. This one wants to be difficult. The other ones did not fight this hard. The ring fits in there pretty well. All of them, they went together pretty good though. They, well, the one went together pretty good. Just be careful when you're threading when you're tightening up this centerpiece. You don't want to overdo it because it does not have a metal threaded piece. You're going right into the material. Alright, so this is the front. And here's the rear piece. Pop it on. Try to align your holes as much as possible. It'll make your life a lot easier. I need something skinnier and longer. I like to stick something in there to hold it in, just to hold it lined up. That works, but that's better. So if you use something to keep it aligned, it does help. And just put your screws in and tighten it up. I am not going to over tighten these. I do plan on probably taking them apart to put the decals on and everything else, so I'm not going to go nuts making them too tight. Also, you should be going in a diagonal from one lug to another, but I didn't tighten them up, so I'll do that as I tighten them. There you go. That's how you do the wheels. The wheels do go together pretty nice, and after this I'll work on the doors and seats as I said before. Alright, in the directions it doesn't tell you that the screw that goes right here, which would be the hinge screw for the seat itself, that is a larger screw. It tells you that all of them are, hold on, that should be the 10mm screw that goes on there, not the 8s. The 8s go for holding all your grab handles in place. This seat together real quick now. The jump seats in the rear do not have the lower grab handles. Only the front seats have the grab handles, or side bolsters, or whatever you want to call them. They look like grab handles. There's the seat so far, and now I just have to install the handles. I almost thought the handle should go like that, or the bolster. Well, it's not really a bolster, but I like it more like that, but they have it upside down, so I'm going to put it the way they have it. Okay, so here's the seat back stays in place, and you could raise the bottom. I guess there's no reclining in this thing. I'm going to finish building the seats, and I will get everything together for the doors. Okay, so I installed the rear two fenders. I wanted to get those on. I did button up the plates on the bottom. I had loosely put them on before, but I figured I got up to the directions and it wanted me to button them up. There was no reason I couldn't have done it earlier when I did it. But here are the seats. Here are the doors. The doors are kind of like a clamshell. They're two pieces which encapsulate the glass. And this is a working latch. So that's spring loaded. So that's going to be your locking mechanism for the doors. We'll see how well it works once we get to it. But let's get these doors mounted, and then we can put the seats in. Now you have a big dowel or a pin, and your hinges. I don't know which one's which. The hinges are directional. They have a little arrow on the back side of them, so make sure you pay attention to that. Okay, getting the pin on the hinge, it was a little hard going through. I had to use a hammer and a piece of wood and carefully tap it in. There's the door. There's the hinge. Door's upside down. There's the door. There's the hinge. Each hinge has an up arrow right there in the seam. So you want to make sure you get those correct. Okay, there's two doors on. I'm going to go ahead and finish the other two doors off camera. And I think, I don't remember where we left off. The battery died on the camera. No, actually my SD card got full. There's a working door. The latches do work. It's so weird. I thought that the little nipples or whatever on the back of this little latch would break off, but this stuff must be pretty damn strong. So here's the dash. It does have a steering wheel, instrument gauges, and some kind of radio. I am gonna put the dash on a little bit later. I think I should be able to still pop it on afterwards. I'd rather move on to something else. This is all detail stuff. Like the decals and all that stuff I'm gonna do at a later time. I just want to get this thing built, and then I'll go back and add details to this thing. But right now I just want to get it built and free up my bench. The directions don't tell you anything about adding your pieces onto here, so you have to assume that you're going to add your steering wheel and everything to this. But I recommend painting it. It might be tough to paint once it's together. Alright, we're installing the seats now. The seats with the bottom grab handles on the side there, they go in the front. The ones without the grab handle go in the rear, and they will be facing backwards. If you wanted to face them forward, it looks like they might fit, but as per the instructions, they face backwards. So that's what I'm gonna do. Let's see how it was. So there's the seats installed. I'm gonna pop the dash in, but I'm not gonna install the gauge cluster or the radio. I want to paint those by hand first. But I think I could work around this. I think it'll be fine. So there's the 4 seats installed. Here's your battery tray area. Here's your start button is in there. You have to line that up. I double-sided tape as per instructions earlier, and I had to undo it to get it to line up because they want you to install the dash way later. And I wasn't aware that there was a hole there for the dash, for the start button. But all my wiring, I ran it through one side. To plug in the battery is going to be a challenge, but you can pull it back out. I'll be able to pull it back out. I'm just going to have the battery wire thrown on top because it's going to be a challenge to get in there with the seats. Now the seats do lift, but they don't, the back of it doesn't flip forward. It's just the bottom lifts, which doesn't give you any extra real space for anything. The upper parts are fixed. They should have did it the other way around. If they would have made the tops fold down, you would have been able to possibly get to the wires. But they did not. The dash pieces I still have to put in. I have to, I'm going to paint those by hand to make it look a lot nicer. And here's the doors. The latch is working. There are 2 other pieces that go here on both sides. I was going to paint them by hand as well. They look like a circuitry, and one is kind of like a gas can type looking thing. So I'm going to paint those by hand. So I do plan on putting all the finishing touches and everything possibly on another video. I don't know if I'll record that, but I'll show you the final product when it's done. All that stuff is tedious, and to record and all that's not interesting at all. So that's all just painstaking. Alright, let's proceed. I think next is the roof parts, and after the roof parts, I could throw the tires on. Now, I don't know what goes on here for the spare tire, but I haven't seen a piece that would adapt to a hex. This is a weird, looks like some kind of a spline. I haven't seen a part to attach my spare tire to this. Apparently this little piece here goes in your dash, and that should be your start button. So that would go over your ESC start button. So here's the standard roof parts. You have 2 removable tops, it looks like. Front section and rear section. Then you have the lower part and the upper part, which is the top section. But I bought the light kit. And the light kit comes with roof parts too. So let's see what am I not going to use. So your light kit comes with the integrated light bars front and rear. So these pieces are removable. So your light kit is going to replace this piece here. Everything is just a solid print. So you can't get in here to put your light bar unless you do an aftermarket light bar of some sort. So I'm not using this piece. And I have lights that I'll have to figure out. I might put them in place, but I'm not going to wire them up since there is no module with it. And I want to make sure that I could just plug these in without blowing the bulbs. Okay, so we're working on the roof here, and this is the first frame part of the roof. Now there are screws so you have screws that go through this into this section here that I just put on. But now there are some screws that need to go in here first, and some that actually go all the way through this section. So you kind of have to hold it up, figure out which ones you need to actually put on first, or else you'll block the other ones you need to get to. All right, so this is the next part. Now, these roof panels require magnets, which they provided. They don't say in the instructions how you're supposed to attach the magnets to this, so I'm just going to use hot glue. I'll probably do that later. That's going to be tedious, especially if I want to keep it clean. So I am going to finish attaching the main roof section and the light bar covers just to finish it off. But I'm not going to wire up the lights yet, since that's a whole nother process. Now I did say these pieces require magnets. The magnets were provided. Now, the magnets will not go against another magnet. What they will be touching are the heads of the screws that hold this section in. So if you notice I noticed that the holes are tapered. So obviously your screws are going to go in there. There's two holes. If you get the light kit, I don't know, I could check the other one, but there's two holes that are not used if you have the light kit because the bottom frame is not drilled for it. Alright, so it doesn't look much different, but you could tell that this has like the roof rack, and this is where these pieces will sit. Now, warning. Oh, hold on. Oh, good. They were smart enough to leave a spot for you to be able to stick your finger in to pop these off once the magnet's on there. So that's a good thought. I like that. Okay, I forgot where I left off. I was working on the roof. Had to fight with some of the screws. The hatches or the removable roof pieces that come off are supposed to use magnets, but I didn't install them yet, so neither of the hatches are ready. I did not do the light bars. I just put the covers on. I didn't wire in the lights yet. I just wanted to get this semi done and get this video done. But we are going to throw the tires on real quick, and we're going to take it in the next room and see how the steering all works. And if you notice, I use a lot of hand tools. On real cars, I would tend to over-tighten stuff and break stuff, so I feel safer using hand tools. I'm going to have to go through all the screws on these axles and make sure that they're Loctited in, because I'm going to have to Loctite them in. They're not Loctite. There's no Loctite on these axles. Okay, here it is. It's built. Still need to work on the lights, light bars, and all the decals and some painting, some finishing touches. But overall, here's the Taken 500 or Taken 500. All right, here's the rear. I put the spare tire on. I just found a long M4 bolt, and I put that in there, and that seems to be fine. It needs a bigger washer. The washer I found was a little small, so I'll look for a bigger washer for that. This thing does have four-wheel steering, so we're going to check that in a second. Overall, it looks good, and let me pop these off before I flip it over, because they'll just fall out. There's the bottom of it. Everything seems like a really nice, smooth transition. So I mean, the design is actually really cool. Here's the front. It does articulate pretty good. I mean, and look at that. The other three tires are flat on the table. So it does. Right now I have 60 weight oil in here. It's probably kind of high for this. I wanted to go lower, but I had 60 weight or 10. I didn't want to go as low as 10, so I went with 60 weight. I have right now a 3S battery in here. I'm not even going to put these panels on right now. I have a 3S battery in here. Such a cool design though. It is a really, I like the way it looks. I just have front steer on. Whoa, I thought it'd be a lot slower. I'm going to take this off the table. I thought it was going to move a lot slower than that. Okay, here we are testing out the steering on the Taken. This front steer. I have to figure out how to get that rear to lock when it's not in use. I might need a stronger servo, but here's rear steer. It's extremely slow in reverse, which I have to look into. But here is crab walk. Right now, here's four-wheel steer. Okay, so it does need some tuning. I have to look at the settings in the Fusion Pro to see if there's anything to do about the reverse or if there's anything I need to change. I might swap out the 35 kg servos for the 55 kg servos that I have. It looks like it has trouble returning the tires back to the center point. So I'm gonna take a look at them. I have to tighten up these axles. The steering on these axles is all floppy. I'm gonna have to see what I need to do to tighten these up. And I have to do the lights and all the finishing touches and all the decals. But if you guys want to see this next to, here it is. I showed it to you earlier when it was just a frame, but this is a 1/10 scale crawler, and this is a 1/10 scale crawler. Now the only thing, I mean, here, let's put it up next to the Miller. Put it up next to the Miller Motorsports, which is a bigger. Here's the Tacken, and here's the Miller Motorsports. The Miller Motorsports looks tiny compared to the Tacken. Try to get it in front here. I mean, there it is in front, and you have a lot of Tacken left. There you go. The only thing that I want to hold the rift up next to it. Okay, here's the axial rift. Wheelbase is still way shorter. It's still a lot smaller than the Tacken. And the axial rift is a big 1/10 scale. I actually have like 2 more of these unbuilt that I haven't built. It was just I got them when they were a great deal, and I thought they were cool. But yeah, that just shows you the sheer size of this. I don't know where they got 1/10 scale from. I mean, this is a tactical vehicle. If on your website it says that they were trying to develop it to replace the Humvee. I don't know how true that is. Well, it had like a Humvee W. I don't know what that meant. But they were trying to develop this, and I guess this is a scale model of it. I have no clue. But here it is. It is large, and it is cool. And with opening roof. Actually, let me show you. Here it is with the doors open. If you want to stand out at the crawler park, I think you're gonna get some looks with this thing. Here it is with all the doors open. Did squeeze a 3S battery in there. And like I said, it's easier just to keep the battery lead on top and just connect it that way. If not, you're going to be wrestling with it to try to get in between where the seats are and everything. It's damn near impossible to get down there. So if you leave the battery lead out, it'll be much easier. You'll thank me later. But here's all 4 doors open. I said it does articulate pretty well. Yeah, the tire I just measured. You can get about 7 inches of before it picks up any other tire, or actually probably more, probably 7 to 8 inches with my setup. And with the 4-wheel steering, it does clear the body, so that's a non-issue. So you can do 4-wheel steering without any issues. The only thing, I suggest stronger servos than I went with. And next time you see this, hopefully I'll have all the lights on it, all the magnets installed on the roof panels and everything else, and all the decals. But okay, so there you have it, the Tacken 500. Hopefully this video was helpful to anybody who's been looking or is interested in this thing. If you are, you can look it up. It's Primer Artifact Tacken 500. There's 3 different versions. You could just get the 3D printed parts, or you can get what I got, which was the advanced kit, which comes with tires and what else? Comes with the tires, the rims, and I'm not sure what else. You can look it up. And then there's the Pro version that comes with all your electronics. Alright, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.